Welcome to Side Quests. My name is Jay Munford and I do research for a living and make some games for fun. You might know me from my podcast, Game Crimes, a black market history of video games. Me and my pal Mike Bachman from the Greeting Adventurers podcast do our absolute best to teach you about the weird and wild game history that exists on the margins of society. From hacking and bootlegging to white-collar crime and queer history. But I'm here today to talk about something else entirely, a video game entitled King of Colosseum II. King of Colosseum II is a pro wrestling game released on the PlayStation 2 by Spike Chunsoft. And if you don't know anything about pro wrestling, please stick around. I wrote this one for you. In 20XX, a wrestler named Mitsuhiro Misawa took his last breath. His real name was Mitsuhiro Misawa. It is hard to know exactly when those last bits of light crossed his eyes, but you can watch the last breaths leave his body, if you know how the internet works. Misawa died in the middle of an arena, a crowd of endless faces just praising and screaming his name, and although his wife and children were informed that he died of blunt force trauma to the spine, to the well-informed he died of a backdrop suplex. The backdrop suplex is a rudimentary wrestling move, but it has always held a little bit more significance in Japan. More so than its overseas cousins, Japanese backdrop suplexes are pregnant with meaning. It looks like it hurts, which is why wrestlers only use the backdrop suplex as a punctuation mark. All wrestling is meant to look like it hurts, but you hold on the stuff that really looks like it hurts, until it matters. Go find another person, approach them from the back, drape their upper arm across the back of your neck. You know, the bicep, the tricep area. Then you clutch that person by the torso around the waist where the belt is. Lift them, and then fall back. You now know what it feels like to kill a man. Now, go pick up a controller for your Sony PlayStation 2 entertainment system. You can use your right index finger to hold down the R1 button, and then press the X button. Approximately 1.6 seconds later, press the X button again. You can do this a million times, and it won't even hurt anyone. The match that killed Misawa took place on June 13th, 2009. It was a tag team match against Akitoshi Saito and Bison Smith. Misawa teamed with Go Shiozaki in an attempt to gain the Global Honored Crown Tag Team Championship. As the owner of the wrestling promotion Noah, Misawa ultimately made the storyline decisions such as who would win or who would hold which championship. This made him, seemingly, a man in total control of his ultimate fate. It's hard to understand sometimes, as an outsider, but to lose in one's last match, also known as going out on your back, it's the dream ending to most noble wrestlers' careers, to most noble wrestlers' stories. The last great act of wrestling that you can do is to give of yourself to benefit others. Wrestling is a real sport, pretending to be fake, pretending to be real. Matches are predetermined, and crowds are well aware of it. Not just aware, but it's why they watch. Wrestling requires the performers to be both athletically capable and willing to hurt themselves. The best villains in wrestling aren't the performers who are the most operatic, but the performers most able to look injured and wounded. The best heroes make their violence look emphatic, gestural, acrobatic, more so than realistic. There's a sense, at least when you sit in the audience, that if these performers weren't in control of themselves, somebody could get killed. As video games moved into the mainstream cultural realms of the 2000s, the marketing plan of every game developer, game magazine writer, press release author was always realism. Realism. To be real. Does this fake person's face resemble a real person's face? Does this fake gun sound similar to a real gun? Is the game's artificial intelligence smart enough to act like a human being does when a human being's been hit by a car? The aim, I guess, is to create an endless series of disposable worlds that look and feel and function like our very own real world, but we can throw them away anytime we want. There's a sense, as a passive consumer, that if game makers weren't in control of their worst impulses, if game makers weren't artisans of the highest caliber, we might realize video games are a fake reality, pretending to be real, pretending to be fake. Not out of necessity, but by choice. The existence of gamey elements like controllers and life meters and save game notices remind us as players that we are not lost in art. We are active participants in art, in the act of playing. We're performing. Really powerful and memorable games ask something of the player, some level of earnest investment. A commune between developer and player. And playing with other people allows us to discover each other through our methodologies of play. The ultimate goal of games, the way I see it at least, is to help us discover something in ourselves or in others that may otherwise lay buried. King of Colosseum II is in itself an entry into a greater series of work. It's a brainchild of Masato Masuda, creator of Pro Wrestling on the NES and the Fire Pro Wrestling series. King of Colosseum II is intended to be one more iteration of Masuda's digital wrestling management and simulation game. When you're close enough to Fire Pro and play the new entries as they come out, every new entry in the series just feels like a continuation of some larger game. Some update of the spreadsheet, some tweaking of the knobs. And despite his impressive developer chops, Masuda became known for wrestling games. And it's clear why. He never stopped looking for something more perfect than what he had. He died at age 48 on April 4th, 2014. He lived 2 years longer than Mitsuhiro Misawa. King of Colosseum makes an odd first impression. When you pick up the controller, it's not immediately clear how to play. And if you don't know what the R1 button does, you couldn't learn it in a vacuum. Every movement and motion is context-based. And learning the controls is different than learning the rhythm of a wrestling match. It's the difference between pressing the buttons on a trumpet and actually playing a song. King of Colosseum isn't realistic, but it is hyper-accurate. The 3D models in the game don't look human in any way, but they interlock with each other well. The arm fits well behind the head. The arms clutch the waist. Both wrestlers squat before the cinch, and the bottom wrestler lifts the top wrestler up and back. The wrestlers didn't look photorealistic when this game came out, and they certainly don't now. Every model seems to be made out of pudding and have a face texture minted on Hell's printing press. So it's awkward to control, and it looks weird, and I think that's cool. I don't mind I'm playing an old video game. I don't mind that this doesn't look like my world. I want to learn how wrestling matches work. The player is really well aware of the game's unreality, and the game's context-based rhythm makes performing a basic wrestling move into a trial. You add a second human being into the occasion, and you start to feel a real sense of accomplishment in your wrestling matches. You begin to feel accomplishment together. One of you moves in for the cinch, and your finger hovers over that button for about 1.6 seconds. You're waiting to press it at the right time, because too early, and you're guaranteed to be pushed off, or worse, took to the ground. Your opponent is doing the same, and you've locked into a sweaty, nervous rhythm together. The person who wins the button press transitions into a headlock, grabbing the other player around the skull, and pulling the head to the side hip. With a well-placed R2 press, during the motion of the head pulling down, the player being placed into the headlock desperately grabs their assailant around the chest, and in one fluid motion lifts up, like bringing in a bag of dog food in from the car. Once the dog food bag is up, you fall backwards, and you've successfully performed a backdrop suplex. In King of Colosseum, you don't input the motions to do moves. You feel them. I first played King of Colosseum II in 20XX myself, and I felt it immediately. King of Colosseum's strengths are in play as performance. The two players aren't competing to win, but competing to act and interpret. You won't really get much out of King of Colosseum by just trying to win. The crowd doesn't care for it. There's a scoring feature. You won't accomplish anything by being the most technically skilled player. You need chemistry, personal chemistry. Because playing King of Colosseum with someone willing to buy into its game logic is a treasure. It's the both of you creating that chemistry together. You have to get the crowd into your match together as an act of meticulous performance, knowing what to do and when. You have to cool the crowd down with a quieter pose or wrestling hold if the action gets too hot, for the fear of getting them too excited to buy into the longer struggle. Your perfectly placed build to a climactic finish is thwarted by an accidental button input What was supposed to be your shining moment of your performance was just dusted as your video avatar flails and flops in such a way that some annoying YouTube reviewer would say, "A real janky animation here." A 12-minute match that earns a 73% feels perfunctory. A 9-minute match that earns an 81% almost feels like getting away with something. And any match with two people that gets above a 93% feels like getting married. This game comes to life as a way for its players to create the act together, the act of wrestling. And in real fake wrestling, just as in fake real wrestling, you have to learn how to give of yourself to your partner in order to create the best performance. You and your dance partner could pick from a gajillion wrestlers. If you like Japanese wrestling, and I do, this game is the best approximation of the golden ages of Japanese wrestling, the legendary Sumo Hall and Big Egg Dome days. These epic clashes between muscled up clowns and heroes that don't even know the word die. That's not really the point though. That's not why I'm talking about King of Colosseum. The point is that in King of Colosseum you could pick Mitsuhiro Misawa, and your friend could pick Bison Smith. And we are never guaranteed a happy ending to the match. But when you're behind a controller, performing a backdrop suplex only leads to a change in statistics, not a change in someone's flesh and blood. To love wrestling is to create an exhaustive memory of violence, and simultaneously hope that none of your favorite performers ever get hurt. To watch someone get punched in the face, and then hold gratitude to the person who was punched. Oh my god, he can sell. I think my love of King of Colosseum comes from its focus on performance rather than violence, and the fact that it comes to life when played with other people. I don't enjoy playing this game by itself, because the matches aren't any good. A good match of King of Colosseum is fluid and beautiful. Two people in some kind of eternal dance. And digital otherwise, a good wrestling match is an act of love. Happy gaming, y'all.